Hi, y'all. Welcome to this week's episode of Ducking Reality. Today in the pond, I have Judie Palmer, who is the owner and operator of Natural Healing.
Yes.
And so you are an empath and a psychic medium.
Yes.
And I actually got to talk to you on Squirrel Girls, and that'll be out before this comes out. And so I met you through my friend Sandy. She gave me a reading. That's how I first met you. And then Anna and I got to interview you a little bit about what you do. And I wanted to do more. And I wanted to know more. Because I wanted to kind of get to know your story and learn how you leaned into this gift that you have.
Okay.
And how you kind of knew. And then I want to kind of get into the science of it, because I think that that's the amazing part, that you were like, no, here's all the scientific fact that backs up this thing I kind of always knew. And you trusted in a time that I imagine was a really hard time to kind of come into being a medium, because you've done it professionally since you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
So give us a little bit of the Judy origin story.
Okay. Well, I was actually, there's a difference between being a medium and being a psychic.
Right.
And most people have, since they're very young, are already, their intuition is extremely strong.
Right.
It's only when we start getting into allowing our reason and our five senses to take over that we have a problem with our intuition. And we'll talk about that scientifically, how that happens. So, I feel like I was a medium before I was a psychic.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I was born with the ability to communicate and see and hear spirits. So, for example, when I was probably about 5 or 6, I used to ask my parents, and I can still clearly see myself in the kitchen looking up at them and saying, who are those people upstairs walking around and talking? And I understand from my sister, my mother really hated that.
Well, it's got to be kind of scary and off-putting that your kid can see all this stuff that you have no idea about.
Right. And, most mediums that they get on podcasts and stuff, and they talk about, all the wonderful stuff about it. But growing up in the 50s and 60s, it's considered occult, and it was not considered Christian at all.
Right.
So having these abilities was kind of traumatic for me. But I can tell you from having those experiences, I was able to actually help my clients more, even still today. So I'm grateful for those experiences, but instead of having like sexual abuse trauma, on where a lot of people have had experienced that. I didn't. But, instead it was kind of psychic medium trauma, abuse.
Right.
Here.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of different things. It was just really natural for me. I do have one of my spirit guides. His name is Thomas, and he likes to appear at age 5. And he was my spirit guide when I was younger. And only because he stayed, 5, did it work out for us.
Oh, okay.
But when I started having experiences of, like, whether it be on television or, Halloween scary stuff, did I start to worry about him coming into my bedroom. And I would start getting really upset and start screaming, and my mom would come in, turn the light on, and say, what is wrong?
Right.
And I'd say, the giant gingerbread man is coming out of the closet again. Where before that, I had no problem. And so it took a little bit of a while to get used to him again. But the nice thing about it is that when I was 25, I went to a finishing school. And my teacher looked at me and said, there's this little boy next to you, and he says, I love apple pie. And I remembered him. And I said, that's Thomas from when I was younger.
Right.
So we recreated. But during that whole time, between 5 and 25, he was still with me. He was still working with me. For example, I had a sandbox my dad built in the backyard. And Thomas wanted to show me where we would be living when we got older, when I got older. And so we made a big dent. And I'm from New York, by the way. Most people probably don't know that. But New York, it didn't look like this. So, we made a big hole in the sandbox and we filled it up with water from the garden hose. Mm-hmm. And I had some, plastic horses. And of course, there was sand. He says there's going to be lots of sand and big pieces of water. And, he was creating California.
That's amazing.
And so, I just went with it all. At the same time, he also would bring friends. So I look at them as probably those friends as being from other planets.
Oh.
Maybe possibly aliens, as we would call them. And they were very nice, very friendly. I didn't have any problems with them. They did not look like, they looked more human to me. So they didn't look like, the
little gray man.
Yeah. It didn't look anything like that. So, but I knew that they weren't from here, from Earth. And we would all converse and have a good time in the sandbox.
So that was like your little kind of portal, safe space to have that kind of experience.
Exactly. So one of the big problems that, talking about, the negative side of these things is if you're in a family. And I knew that I was brought into this family for a good reason, and it was to strengthen my abilities, for one. But, when you're in a family where none of this stuff happens, none of them are psychic or spiritual, they're all Methodists, strong Methodists, you have a tendency to not have any excuses. So that day that we were building California in the sandbox, Thomas and I, my mom called me in for lunch and I forgot to turn off the garden hose.
Uh-oh.
So it flooded out the backyard and I got blamed for that. And she just didn't understand, why are you doing this?
Right.
And I was trying to explain and she just didn't want to hear it because this kind of stuff is something wrong with my daughter,
back
back
Do you
then.
think when kids are little and they have imaginary friends, it might be actual spirits?
Absolutely.
So when they just kind of grow out of being able to see them, it's...
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you'll hear them, offer them tea and stuff, and it's cute until you get to a certain age, and then the adult, the reason and the five senses says this isn't cute anymore. And I've actually had children as clients who blocked their abilities, their natural abilities, because they took their, imaginary rabbits, to school and were made fun of by the other kids. And then they just killed them all. I remember one little girl saying that.
Right.
I killed them all off. I won't see them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of sad. In today's day and age, it's a lot easier because it's out there more.
Right. It's more accepted. It's looked less like witchcraft and because now you have the science behind it.
Yeah, the science behind it. Exactly.
That's the part that I didn't kind of realize until we had been chatting about, like how the science kind of came into it and how, like you were explaining, and we'll kind of get into, I guess, we'll jump in right now. But you were saying things about how things come in through your eye and go up through your 8th cranial nerve. And just the fact that you knew which nerve gives you kind of that was kind of, not kind of, it was like mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
That not only, like, because it just, I've always been a person that believes in this. And when I was young, we've talked about it. I would talk about the ghost that lived in my house, and my dad would be like, stop it. And he would get angry, like irrationally mad when I would talk about it. And then as I got older, I found out there was someone that was murdered in my house. And then it was the same guy's name. And then years later, I would meet his daughter. And I was like, she confirmed everything that I kind of knew. Right. And I was looking at, my dad was there the moment I kind of met her, and I was so excited to meet her. And I was just like, your dad lived with us forever. And my dad's rolling his eyes and is just shaking his head. And she confirmed everything.
Yeah.
And it was all stuff I shouldn't have known.
Exactly. There's a new term for it. It's called spiritual science.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's trying to combine or get certain scientists, to understand that you can merge the two together.
Right.
And it all has to do with energy or atoms. Many times I talk about the story of Adam and Eve, but I I do ATOM instead of ADAM. So Adam and Eve, as being, a great story to kind of explain how our reason and our five senses is more the problem than a snake.
Right.
Yeah. So, scientists, they believe everything has solidity, where in the other side, or in actuality, nothing is solid.
Right.
What it is, and here we go with the science, okay, like the table that we're sitting at right now is very solid. So anybody out there listening, just take a look at your table, okay, right now. Mm-hmm. And it appears very solid to you. And if you tried to slam your hand into it, it would probably hurt your hand.
Right.
But know that your hand and the table are made up of the same thing, which is atoms. Now, yes, there is a little tiny bit of material, okay, in an atom, but the rest of it is all energy.
Right.
So when you take a bunch of atoms and you group them together, it's called a cohesion, and it has a factor. So the more they group together, the more our physical eyes can perceive it. So it has a lot to do with perception. And so your table is more dense, has a stronger cohesion factor than your hand, but it's made up of the same thing. Now, when we pass away, okay, the atoms spread out. They get thinner.
Right.
And so our eyes, it makes it harder for our physical eyes to see spirits, because it's sort of like needing a microscope to see germs.
Right.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, I just never stopped believing in that.
Right. So. What do you think gave you confidence is the wrong word, but just the knowing of never giving it up?
Okay. I really think in my younger years, I was in my own little world. So I had a couple of friends in the neighborhood. I mean, it was a dirt road that I was raised on, and a corral full of horses next door, and a small farm across the street. And so there wasn't a lot of people in there, but there was a brook that ran. It was called the Pascack Brook, and it ran through. And it was with all of these trees, a density. So I would go out and hang out there. There was a little bridge you could cross to continue on the road. And so I would just hang out there and talk to the spirits, that and the sandbox.
Right.
So they were my friends. So I really think that's why I never, allowed my reason to give up on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're a kid in rural New York, and you have kind of just like nature to be out in, and no phones and not TVs, and, none of that stuff kind of getting in the way of it.
Exactly. So that really helped a lot. In today's day and age, I think a baby can start right out with being a medium and a psychic medium. And that is because it's more acceptable.
Right.
So, parents might have a spiritual point of view. We have a friend who has a son, okay, that just really,
yep.
And mom is promoting it. So if I had that, I don't think it would have been as difficult.
Right.
I did have a grandmother who could communicate with spirits in her dreams. And that was my maternal grandmother. And I thank her for a lot. Not that it was discussed a lot, but the fact that my mom was thinking about taking me to a child psychologist because she thought something was wrong. My maternal grandmother would say, leave her alone. It's a gift from God.
Right. Which is a big thing for a woman in the 50s to be saying, especially a Methodist woman who's, but she had a little bit.
She was religious.
Yeah.
But, you can be religious and be this way. I mean, the two come together. What doesn't come together is the power trip of the organized religion.
Right.
That is what is very reason-minded, very five-sensed. But as far as all of Christianity or, Islamic or whatever, Hebrew, it all starts with love.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's crazy to think of all the wars that have happened because of religion, because all religion, it should be based in love and
Exactly.
acceptance.
But see, it wasn't the religion, it was the organized part
right.
of the religion that was a problem.
It's the guys that tell you how to be religious.
Yeah.
Because you actually see people. Like, you can see so you live in a completely different reality than the rest of us. Because like so you're explaining that everyone has at least 4 souls with them.
Spirit guides.
And so, but you have kind of a main one that you work with a lot, right? Is John?
John is actually a spirit friend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So spirit friends and spirit guides are different.
Well, yeah, but they can do the same things.
Okay.
So after John passed away, he started working with Thomas and started working with, patients and those that I had. And at the time. And so basically, he just kind of joined in. So, but, you could still call them a spiritual guide, whether it's a family member or a friend. I just kind of divided up more than I probably should. But yeah.
Well, I imagine like you have to try to have like a way to discern different things.
Especially when you're teaching.
oh yeah.
Yeah. Especially when you're teaching, because the students need that kind of linear minded,
right.
reason minded, 5 cents type of point of view. That's why I bring science into my studies.
Right. So when you kind of to back up and bring everyone up to speed. So when you were in high school, you first met John. He's a real person.
Yes. He is.
Or
yes.
what? I mean, I guess everyone always is a real person.
Yeah. Well, let's step back a minute here.
Please.
Okay. My spirit guide, Thomas, he was my son in a past life. So you have a soul family that you're where there's a whole bunch of souls, okay, that you've had past lives with, lifetimes with. And within that soul family is also your soul mates. And I always believe there's more than one. Those are the ones that you've had the most lifetimes together with, or maybe all.
Okay.
So John is part of my soul family. So when Thomas came to me, because as a soul, before he came back into this physical body, Thomas came to me and he said, I would like to be your child again. Okay. I didn't end up having any children, so he stayed as a spirit guide.
Oh.
Right. But he came back because we had a connection together, and he knew he could help me through my childhood years. Yeah. He could. So going back to John.
Right.
Okay. I met John. We were both 16. It was a high school dance where the boys were on one side, the girls were on the other. Doesn't happen anymore. Okay. But we're talking about Nanuet, New York. And basically this was 1966, 67.
Okay.
And he came in with his brother. Now, picture this for a minute, okay? There's a stage, okay? It's an auditorium. It was the George Miller Middle School, okay, George Miller School. And it was also used as sometimes as a cafeteria, okay? But in this particular instance, there was a stage. And so one of my classmates were on the stage as a DJ.
Okay.
Playing 60s, music. Okay. And so they were clean cut, The boys were clean cut. John comes in, same age as us, with long dark hair, okay? A beard and a mustache, believe it or not, at the age of 16. Hairy family, I guess, okay? And his brother right behind him, Michael. And so what ended up happening was I got all excited, because here I was a wannabe hippie, okay, in those days. I was like the Doris Day of hippies, back then. Really naive, So I didn't go to Woodstock. John did, but I didn't. So basically, he came over and asked me to dance. And I was like nervous dancing with him. But it was a slow song. It was Surfer Girl by the Beach Boys.
Okay.
And I thought, how are we going to do this? Well, he just stepped back and started doing kind of like a jitterbug kind of thing and laughing. And basically, he was making fun of
Right. The whole thing.
Come on, So then we went outside to talk. And that's how we met.
Was it just like a blooming friendship, or was it like a little romantic kind of vibe?
Well, I was kind of scared of him, to tell you the truth. 16, very naive, grew up in a rural type area, didn't have a lot of friends, own my own little world.
Right.
And I'm looking at this guy and he looks so much older than me. And I had this feeling like he was wiser. What it ended up being is that he's an older soul than I am. And I was picking that up at the time. He was a perfect gentleman. Perfect gentleman.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right. So I think he liked me more. He's saying yes. Right away, the blonde, blue-eyed, young thing, pretty. Okay. And so he asked me to go to a concert, and his mom took us. Okay. My mom was really leery about him because when she first met him, she didn't like him at all.
Well, especially if he's 16, rocking like a full beard and mustache.
Right. Exactly. So it's like she didn't like him at all. But she was dating at the time, because my father passed away when I was 13. She was dating John's neighbor.
Oh, wow.
Who was also a widower. So they pulled up in the driveway and he looked at my mom and she said, "Oh my God, what did my daughter get into? Blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Who is this person on the front steps?" Kept him outside. Come in. Okay. And basically he said, he's okay. He's my neighbor's son. And he's brilliant. He's very intellectual.
Oh, that's a nice little
right.
perk. Yeah.
And he's the same age as your daughter. And look, they're just sitting on the front steps.
Right.
Okay.
Calm down.
Calm down. So, right, So another one of those things. Okay. So he did ask me to a concert, and his mom, Sally, she came and picked us up. It was in New York City, and it was Ravi Shankar.
Oh, wow.
He had tickets to Ravi Shankar. And he did try to hold my hand. Inside. And then we left a little early because I started falling asleep. I remember all of this. So he said, "Let's go." And across the street was pretty much, I was going to say Goldgate Park, but that's not it. Right? We're talking about Central Park in New York. And he was holding my hands there, and we just talked. We talked. So I do think he was a little bit more interested, But once I got to know him and stuff, yeah. So we never did have a sexual relationship, nor were we considered girlfriend or boyfriend. He had his stuff going on. I had my stuff going on. John was an amateur film director at the age of 15. He won awards for that. He was also one of the few people who owned an electric mandolin. And he would go down to New York City and play. And he would play at 3:00 in the morning on the phone to me with my mother screaming, "Get off the phone." Yep. Right. So she was a troublemaker, I'll tell you. So we did that. So we knew each other, quite a bit.
Right.
And from time to time we'd get together, and do some things. But he had a local band. He invited me to come and listen to them play. And I did, different things like that. But I guess my interest was more acting. I kind of wanted to be more like a stage actress.
Oh, okay.
During that time.
Yep.
I had my own guitar. I would sing. I would go different places. In fact, the night before he died, I was at a local church, and it was the end of summer school, and it was a Black Baptist church,
Oh, wow.
which was interesting in those days. And I was playing guitar for them.
Right.
I have a picture of it from the newspaper. And he died the next day. But so I didn't have a chance to talk to him, before he passed. But that was not the reason for our relationship. Our relationship was to be what it is now.
Right.
And we just had to meet physically.
Right. So that you
meet
could find each other.
So we could find, and start up what we're doing now.
Right.
Yeah.
And when he was alive, did he know about your gifts? What was his kind of...
Yes. Yeah. John had mental illness. He was classified as paranoid schizophrenic. I think it was maybe a touch of bipolar in there somewhere along the way. And that's why they said paranoid. But John at times had a lot of chatter going on in his head. And he'd have to sort it out. Back in the 60s, the way to go was to go to the state hospital and have the electric
shock therapy.
Electric shock therapy. He was also on lithium, which lithium is good for bipolar.
Right.
Right. So, of course, now they have all other kinds of things for it. So, but back then that was about it. And so him being very gifted and having this mental illness, he could see and hear good spirits as well as negative ones. So for me, I was just getting the positive ones,
right.
except for one. Okay, but I got rid of her. Okay. But I don't know how I did it either, but I got rid of her. This was after my father passed away. But for him, he knew the difference because of his parents being very Irish Catholic, but open-minded.
Okay.
They actually had a friend that also did readings and did seances.
Oh.
That's what they called them back
Yep.
then. Okay. So we were sitting on the front steps and I was really worried about myself. And I said, I just, you talk about having, voices. I do too and stuff like that. And he says, Judy, and he put his hand on my thigh. I knew this. I remember this. And he said to me, I'm the one with the mental illness. You have a gift and you need to keep that going. And so he got me to continue it. Mm-hmm. And until we met again in 1975, when he showed up at a very first reading I ever did, okay, with my mentor. Yes.
How did you find, did you seek out mentors or did they kind of just follow into your path?
Kind of followed into my path. It's another one. I don't know how many other mediums actually do this anymore, but thinking that John was gone, and thinking that I kept seeing my father, kept hearing my father, and stuff. And I went, this isn't right. And, I was starting to take, classes. I had taken classes in psychology and I said, something's not right here. Okay. So I went to see a psychiatrist because I thought that's what I needed.
Right.
And I happened to mention it to my coworker at Aetna Life and Casualty in White Plains, New York, if anybody knows where that used to be. Okay. So I explained to her what I was doing, and she said, oh, no. I have somebody you need to go see. Okay. She can help you out. And so I don't think it was a coincidence that Melanie and I sat next to each other.
Right.
In that business, and that she was into this. No coincidence here.
No, yeah.
So I went to see Naomi. She was a psychic medium, and she started reading me, and she told me that there was a man standing behind me in a uniform missing 2 buttons. And before my father's casket was closed, my mom took 2 of the firehouse buttons on his uniform off, made a charm bracelet, one for me and one for my sister.
That's beautiful.
And so I knew that was him.
Mm.
And then she said there was this young man with long hair and wants to tell you, I'm okay now.
Mm.
I'm okay now. let's talk. Okay.
Right.
I'm here. So I knew that was John. Yeah.
How old were
Yeah.
you in that?
I was 25.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 25. And he passed away when I was 18. So it was, 7 years
Right.
before we really met up. And because of his illness and the way that he passed away, it took him a while to adjust to the other side.
Right.
And I do think his family held him back a little bit. They just shut his bedroom door and just didn't go in and, this type of thing. Right. So they grieved a lot. So that made it harder, I think, for him. I mean, today I'm sure that Sally and Joe would do it totally different.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think that, I mean, I guess you probably do know, like when someone passes and you do kind of just shut it down, that must energetically affect them?
Yes. In fact, when my dad died when I was 13, I was Daddy's little girl. He was a volunteer fireman. His job was assistant postmaster of the Spring Valley Post Office,
wow.
New York, and he was a Spring Valley volunteer fireman. And he saved he dragged out 3 of his fellow firemen out of this building, but died from smoke inhalation, saving them. So that was a shock to me. And so for, I'd say, about 2 years, all I did was write really sad poems and, just kind of do nothing with my abilities.
Right. Of course. I mean, at 13, when you're still trying to figure out
who you are, what you're doing.
And if this thing that you can do that no one else seems to be able to do, or very few people, it has to be confusing.
Yeah. Well, at the time, I heard from my spirit guides. Okay. I had met John yet, of course, but, I heard from Thomas and a few others that think of my dad as going on vacation. Took his suitcase and he went on vacation. He'll be back. You'll talk to him again. Okay. But I was thinking, okay, he really didn't die.
Right.
Because at 13, you don't really understand that much about death, but your 5 senses says if you can't see them, if you can't feel them or hear them or smell them, they're gone.
Right.
They're done, So it was like, all right. So for a little while that kept me kind of going through the funeral and so forth. But then when the reason started coming in saying, wait a minute, I don't see him.
Right.
I don't see him here. And it was actually because I was in mourning. Our emotions can get in the way of our abilities to be able to perceive them, to talk to them, to communicate with them.
Right.
And so it wasn't until, I could calm down my emotions that I could communicate with my dad again. Yeah.
And did that take you a long time to be able to?
No, probably 2 years, maybe. Yeah, that was probably a long time.
Yeah. I mean, especially at 13,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
So, yeah. Yeah, it's sad. I mean, but all of these experiences and what I went through helps me be able to help others.
Right.
And it was interesting. The other day, I was annoyed with a cemetery that I work at, putting together their decedent list. And there's some people that don't want me to do this. And it's because of my abilities. And I asked John, okay, this was just like 5 days ago, I think.
Okay.
So I asked John, I said, why is it that so many people dislike me because of what I do? I was kind of mad. And his answer was, so how many people love you because you've really helped them? That was his answer. And that's the thing. Right. If you have love in your heart, and I did, and you can get past the grief or the mourning, all of your abilities can come back again.
That's a beautiful thing too, because, I've talked about now I want to take a bunch of your classes and kind of learn and develop my own, because there's moments that things happen. Like last night, I was driving and like kind of imagined myself having a conversation with someone. And then the next thing I knew, they were behind me in traffic.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's weird. Like out of nowhere, I was just thinking about like, if I ran into them, what would I say? Kind of.
Exactly.
And then within
there.
seconds, they were right behind me.
See, now that's being psychic.
Right. But you don't think of it like that.
You don't think of it that way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the more, and you know, like I got into a car accident last week and I remember coming up to the light and thinking I should just go straight. And I was like, oh, but I'll just go and, you know, save myself the 3 seconds and I'll take the turn and go into that driveway. And then I got hit and I was like, in my brain, I was like, that didn't just happen. And it took me a minute to be like, oh, yeah, no, it did.
Yeah.
Like, that was your brain telling you to go the different way because of, so you were avoiding this.
Right.
And it's like, how do I get that little voice to be louder? Like, how do I, like, trust it when it's, I hear it and I kind of just brush it off.
Exactly. It's trusting it. And it's also, the reason gets in the way. So we have approximately 60,000 thoughts a day based on our reason and 5 senses.
And I'm an overthinker, so I'm probably at like 120.
Exactly. Right. I think so too. I think it's more like 120 anyway. Yeah. So what happens is the day you were born, your 5 senses started to go to work, interpreting everything. And reason stored all of those experiences, perceptions, everything for future use. So I call it the overgrowth of reason. That was actually the snake, the devil, is the overgrowth of reason. And Eve got the overgrowth of reason. Okay. And Adam, Atom, got the overgrowth of reason. And because of all of that, it's gotten us into a lot of trouble. Our soul now has to keep coming back on a reincarnation basis because of this overgrowth of reason and our 5 senses. It's always kind of saying, well, this is what happened in the past, so the same thing's going to happen again.
Right.
But it does not know that. It can tell you where, when, why, and how. When, where, what, and how.
Right.
But never why. Never why. So with that is your intuition, is the why.
Right.
And we don't pay attention to it because of this overgrowth of reason. So the way to get it back, I like to tell people, try mindful meditation. Because it literally, yes, it calms you down.
Right.
It calms down your reason. And so it allows your intuition to come back.
Right.
And the more you practice it, the more your intuition's going to come back. It's a way of doing that.
Right.
The way of getting it back. Yeah.
That's amazing. And the fact that, like, you've been teaching this for years, too. So you've been helping people develop. So you understand and you see it develop.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah. Well, I have a new one I'm trying to develop, too.
Ooh, okay.
It's called Past Life Genealogy.
Yes, I want to get into this, too. Because
I have a couple of clients that are saying, please, please. Yes, I do genealogy.
Yeah, because the cemetery thing that you do, I was kind of surprised by it, and I didn't think about what it's called a decedent list?
It's a decedent list.
Decedent list. Mm-hmm. Cemeteries are one of my favorite places. I think they're beautiful. And ever since I was a little kid, I would go and that's where I would bike ride or rollerblade. Yeah. And I love them. But I've never thought about how many stories are in a cemetery and how
I know
it's the kind of forgotten people.
Yeah.
So then once I kind of thought about it, thought it makes sense that you would kind of go back to give the voices of the voiceless and the people that are almost forgotten.
Yes.
Because they're not forgotten for you.
Right.
You might run into any one of those people in any other scenario in your life.
Right. And most people would think, they ask me, so when you're restoring this, and a lot of these people died in the 1800s. So when you're restoring this list, I guess you use your ability. And I said, no. Right. I don't. I'm there as a genealogist. Right. And as a genealogist, you got to use your 5 senses of reason. You can use your intuition and know intuitively maybe where you need to look for this information, on them. But no, I don't talk to them. Right. I will if I go to the cemetery for a different reason, but not for the list.
Right. So this is a question. So like John comes with you everywhere. Like I'm sure he's here, whether he's here in this room or with Joseph. But can he travel like anywhere on his own? Like, is he kind of connected to you?
Yeah.
Like tethered to you in a way? Or
no, he's not.
Right.
He actually can go wherever. And a lot of times I hear him saying, Cinderella, Cinderella. So he says to me, he's laughing. Okay, we got him here. Okay. And so basically what he's doing is I'm sending him out on errands. So you can send your spirit guides out for errands. Like if you have a spirit guide and a good friend's father just passed away. I mean, that just came into my head, gay. You might want to send your spirit guide over to comfort your friend.
Okay.
You can do that if you can't be there.
Right.
So you can let them out. You can do that. But John, he had his own spirit guides when he was physically alive, and I had my own. So, it's only now that he's kind of in my realm, but we're all still in the same soul family.
Right.
So one of the things to remember is that your spirit guides come from you or come to you because you've interviewed them before you came back in a physical body.
Right.
And they have come from your past lives. They're part of your soul family. And so you're not going to really get anybody new. The only spirit that would be new is your master guide.
Okay.
Because you can exchange master guides. And they're the ones that are not in the reincarnation process anymore.
Okay. So what process would they be in? They're
outside of the whole reincarnation thing. They're back more to the divine source.
Oh, okay. So do you think like our spirits come back over and over to get to that master level? Like, are we kind of leveling up?
Yeah, we're leveling up. Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. We can have 1,000 lifetimes. Right. I mean, going on even in one stage. I have, I've developed in 1982 with an ascended master named Savai. The two of us put together 7 stages of reincarnation. Linear minded, again, so that the human brain can, work with it. And so in those 7 stages, you can have an infinite amount of lifetimes if you keep screwing up with the overgrowth of reason, right? And you don't get rid of the karma that you had from the last lifetime. So it's a journey. A lot of people call it soul growth. I also used to look at it as younger souls and older souls. And I need to clarify that.
Okay.
Souls aren't young or older. They just are. They exist. And it's the accumulation of each physical lifetime that adds to the soul. And there's 2 parts to that. There's a soul and there's a spirit. Your spirit will always remain pure energy. And that's what's kind of in your heart chakra or the divine love. That's the spirit. Okay. Or a lot of people call it Christ consciousness, is right there. Okay. Your soul kind of takes over the whole rest of your body. And so your characteristics from past lives and so forth, that gets all added in to each lifetime. And your soul stores that. Some people like to call it the Akashic records.
Okay.
Yeah, if they've ever heard that term. Old-fashioned term, though. Okay. And it's stored for, once again, when you come back in a physical body, the spirit and the soul will come back together again. And where all of your soul information will be is in your subconscious mind.
So if you kind of meditate on that and open it to you, I wonder if that's why some people just know so much is because they have access to those memories.
Absolutely.
Those experiences.
Right. And that's kind of what I want to put together with the past life genealogy.
Right.
Where's the genealogy part of learning about your past lives so that you know why you have certain characteristics in this current lifetime.
Right.
And so, yes, to answer that question, yes.
Yeah. And this is the part that is like my brain can't even, it's so excited about, is that when you talk about your soul family and that your soul spirits and your guides are part of that family that you choose to come back in each lifetime, and some people choose not to, so then they're your guides. But with the genealogy, you can trace back and realize that, yeah, these people that you know now, we met in this past life, and here's kind of like the trace of it.
Right. Why is it that you're such best friends and feel like you've known each other forever?
Right. And then if you go back through the genealogy, you can find out that those two people knew each other in whatever year.
Exactly.
That's the part that to me is like, wait, you can actually prove it. And then this goes into also the generational trauma that is kind of so popular now, and epigenetics, and the fact that you, like, how do people transfer things to their kids and things? Well, if we're all soul families.
Exactly.
It makes really perfect sense.
It does. It does. So you can actually put those together. That's why I'm so excited about it.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little work. John's going to help me. Savai's going to help me.
Yeah.
Okay. But it'll take a little bit of work. But I think it's going to be quite a blend. It's merging spiritual and science.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like you're on the cutting edge of like psychology, science, and just understanding humans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Like I wonder, and do you know much about psychedelics?
I never took them. I could hang out with people who did,
right,
and I could see the same things they were saying.
That was my question, is like, you don't need them because you can already tap into that alternate reality.
Exactly.
And do you think psychedelics are kind of what helps get the five senses off of someone?
It's
so that
not going to cause somebody to become a medium.
Right.
Okay. Or a proficient psychic, professional psychic. But what it does is it does show, if science would just allow it to be, it does show that there is the sixth sense, and the sixth sense is beyond the five senses.
Right.
So, I mean, you can taste something and go, why am I tasting that? And then the next thing or smell. I think that might be a better one. Smell Italian food. And, somebody calls you and says, do you know how to make lasagna? I mean, it's like there's all these different kind of connections. Or maybe your loved one that passed away. You're smelling Italian food. They were Italian. They made Italian food all the time. But there's no Italian food around.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. John played a good one on me this morning before we came over here. My husband and I came over here. And John, he came too.
He's like, I'm here too.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay. Thomas is here. Okay. So basically, I was trying to figure out a picture to bring so you could see what John looked like.
Yeah. He's very handsome.
And so I went, okay. All right. I said, well, we've got several pictures, and I finally decided on that one. I said, all right, John, I've made up my mind. We're taking that picture. And no more than like 5 to 10 seconds later, this car goes by our home, and it's playing loud music, and it's knocking on heaven's door. Now, this is the kind of stuff John does all the time, but it's also what your own spirit guides do, because they know there's no such thing as solidity. So they can have different people show up just at the right time, okay? And you'll pick up on that thought that it might's going to happen like you did, and sitting in your car, and then right behind you is the person you were thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. It is. You're psychic, okay?
Right.
And you're intuitive, okay? But you're getting a little help from the spirit world as well. Yeah. They're like your best friends. You got to walk the hill up, up the mountain. They'll just talk to you along the way. Yeah.
The other thing that when we were chatting after our last interview, I had this kind of beautiful moment because you were talking about, we had gone out we were having a bite to eat and a drink, and you're talking about some spirits that were loving the music next door and dancing. And then Joseph was saying how sometimes when y'all are watching TV, the spirits will kind of chime into you.
Yes.
And I thought, I almost making me emotional now too, is that the thought that like we always say, like, people after they pass away, they're still with you. You can talk to them. You'll know what they're saying. And that's something I've held on to since I was young. And then to have you talking about like a spirit from 18 that's now watching TV with you, and you get to see like what they think of that, and that like they really are still here, was just a beautiful moment. And their experience everything that we're experiencing.
Absolutely.
Just slightly different.
Absolutely.
And it's such a beautiful, it's just such a beautiful thing to have and know.
Exactly.
And to see, because when we're sitting together, and like it was asking how you shut it off, and you kind of don't, but that you've learned to kind of get your space from it.
Right.
And like, all right, not right now. And,
Exactly.
I need my time, and they respect it. And
they do. They do respect it. I'm going to throw a crazy idea out there. Okay, to everyone right now. Okay. And I'm going to tell them that you're wondering why somebody from the 18, or as you said, or the 1800s would be still hanging around. Doesn't that make them a ghost? Not necessarily. Now, here's the wild idea I want everybody to kind of think about. Okay. Is that when your soul, and spirit, let's talk about the spirit again.
Okay.
When your spirit decides to come back into a physical body, the divine source still has your spirit. Okay. It's only the soul that transforms from there.
Oh.
But let's think of all spirits being in the divine source, like the sun, if you want to call it that, a spark. And that spirit spark, or Christ consciousness, enters a physical body. Maybe only 1/4 of that spirit will be in the physical body. Oh. Where the rest, a half of it could be it's still with the divine source, and also in another physical body on a different planet. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
That's called parallel lives. But our whole spirit doesn't stay in one physical body. Part of it is still with the divine source. That's why when people do chakras and they do alignments and stuff, and the crown chakra is the divine source, or their spirit, the divine love in the heart chakra. That's why they do that, to reconnect with the rest of your spirit that's still in the divine source.
All right.
Something to think about.
Yeah. So you can actually, one spirit can be living multiple timelines.
Yeah. And it also shares with the soul. Yeah.
So is a spirit and a ghost different then?
Yes.
Okay.
So, for example, I could very possibly be viewing the couple from the 1918s as being spirits still, being souls, gay spirits, but they're actually still maybe physically alive on another planet.
Oh.
So it means that not all of them are stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what makes a spirit, because you said earlier, like John could see the bad spirits, and that you kind of only have had really one run-in.
I had one run-in. This was after my father passed away, and she was really a pain in the neck. Anytime that I took a shower, and if anybody knows about taking a bath or a shower, it's energy, and it can really get your abilities revved up. At least for me, it did.
Okay.
Sometimes it's trees, forest, wood. So basically, she would come and she would tell me that my mother and sister were plotting against me in the kitchen and, do all these kind of things. And one day I just got tired of her and I said, you know what? You need to go away. That's not what's happening. All right. Just go away. And she never came back.
Oh, wow.
But I talked to her directly about it. Some people can do that if they do have a negative spirit around them. Hypnotherapy, EMDR is now helping with that on a psychology basis or psychotherapy basis. There's ways that you can get rid of that entity. but you can also do it yourself.
Right.
With John, he was compromised because he had mental illness. So he had a tough time getting rid of him. But anytime he had the shock treatment or the lithium, okay, and he stayed on that program, it brought him back into his five senses.
So there's a fine line of what makes you kind of a professional versus a psych patient.
Yeah. We're both in the sixth senses at times, Yeah. So the story there's this little joke, okay, that I always tell, okay? And it's about this guru, and he's going down this path in this forest area, and he comes upon a guy that's hanging upside down in a straitjacket in a tree. Mm-hmm. And they get to converse. And finally, the guy in the straitjacket, upside down in the tree, says to him, "Hey, wait a minute. If we think alike and we perceive the same way, why am I here in this tree and you're not?" And the guru looks at him and quietly says, "I kept my mouth shut."
Right.
So, it is a fine line.
Yeah.
Between, mental illness, which throws you into the sixth sense. And me, I have control of it.
Right.
Someone with mental illness does not.
So those voices that they're hearing might actually be spirits talking to them, and they just can't control it.
And trying to help them, but they can't control it.
And they can't
can't shut it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can differentiate, like John is most people, you understand and realize that most people can't see him or hear him. And I kind of feel bad talking about him like he's not here, because I know he is here. Which is
he says it's okay, he's used to it.
I know, but it's like an awkward thing to get your mind to be like.
Right.
Yeah.
He says, just look at the picture.
Yeah, I keep looking at it.
Just talk to the picture, he says. He's got this New York Queens accent. Talk to the picture.
He's Saturday Night Fevering it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because so when someone comes to you for a reading, like I had a reading with you, and I cried almost the whole time because I just lost someone, and you knew things that you shouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And it really is like, as much I was crying from like the comfort that it gave me.
Right.
And the kind of reassurance that it gave me that, it all did happen for, whatever reasoning it needed to. And, that he is still around me and here. And, it's a, I have a friend who's he's in his late 70s, and he was telling me that the other day, like his purpose in my life. And he was like, I think this person's purpose, and he kind of thinks about it like that, like we didn't meet by accident, and he'll joke that we must have known each other in another lifetime, and that's how we found each other and we've become friends. And it really is like when you meet certain people, like I'm good friends with this man who's 78 years old and kind of he has a hard time getting around, but we sit and have the greatest conversations,
right?
And I'm also like, well, I don't know how we got to be friends.
Yeah.
But I know that we were supposed to.
Exactly. Soul family.
Yeah.
You, the two of you are within a soul family. Yeah.
And so, because I understand, like, we all kind of agree to come into our life path before we get here, and then it's figuring out what our kind of path is supposed to be, or what we're clearing out. Mm-hmm. But soul families don't always end up in the same places, right? Like, how does that, is that just the universe kind of at work, or is it?
Well, it depends on your karma. Mm-hmm. Depends on your mission or your purpose, what your soul is asking you to aspire to be in this lifetime. And they have their own stuff too. Mm. So you're not necessarily going to meet up in every lifetime.
Right.
Yeah. We're all working, and you're not always going to be on the same stage either. So they could be like be more of the, what I like to call the younger stages, in physical body. So it's, 1 through 4. Okay. I know I'm probably not supposed to be saying this, but our current president is a 4. Okay. That's a very egotistical, ambitious stage.
Right.
And it's the last stage before losing your ego and losing, that type of ambition, strong ambition and materialism. to start going into the older stages where that kind of stuff is not as important. You know, it's still there because you've experienced it.
Right.
But now you're getting into more of the spiritual, more of the love, more of the what else is out there.
Right.
It's more open-minded. Yeah.
How does one like figure out what their past life was? Like when you do a past life regression with someone, like how does that, like if we were going to do one for me, is it just your guides that tell you, or how does that work?
That is hard for me to do.
Is it?
I am a certified hypnotherapist. And I struggled with past life regression.
Oh, okay.
Because I could see the past life before the client could. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's difficult. So, to kind of just say, okay, how can you guide? But that is what can help. So it's just easier for me to see it for the client.
Right.
But if a client really needs that, okay, and they need to see it and feel it and hear it for themselves.
Right.
In fact, I'm doing one at the end of this month with one of my husband's clients.
Oh.
It's the three of us. And I will do that
Okay.
for her because, make a long story short. She's a client, okay, of my husband's. But I've also done a reading for her.
Mm-hmm.
And my co-host with my podcast, Psych and Soul, she's seeing her for psychotherapy, EMDR psychotherapy. So what we're trying to do is release a really traumatic experience she's had in this lifetime.
Okay.
And so I will be doing some past life regression, plus communicating with someone who passed away that had to do with this trauma in her life and so forth. So I'm going to be sizing up the room to see who else is here. Okay. So when you do go into a past life regression, it really should be the client who's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And you asked me a question. I kind of went off there for a minute and I can't remember what you asked me. Do you remember?
How do you, like if I was going to do the past life regression, do you hypnotize me? Is that, and then I go into like my subconscious?
I don't believe in hypnotizing anybody.
Okay.
I believe in relaxing them to the point where their reason steps aside.
Oh, okay.
And allows the intuition, the instinct, the subconscious mind to come out with all of the past lives. Yeah.
Interesting.
So that you can experience it through your current physical body.
We're going to have to do that.
Yeah. Hypnotism to me, too many people think, they hypnotize them to make them do bad things. Or you think of, a stage thing, so I don't like to use that word.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it more like a guided meditation?
It is like a guided meditation. Let's get that reason out of the way.
Right.
So the intuition, your soul, and your spirit can respond. Yeah.
And so when you do a past life regression for someone, you can tell some of their lives, but you don't usually get all of it, do you?
No. I look for, if they're interested and they don't have a goal, as to what they want to learn about their past lives, I just leave it up to their personal spirit guides who are in the room with me.
Right.
So, because I do this by phone and by Zoom currently. And so, they're going to come and stand by me and they're going to show me pictures and so forth. I like to become that person, my client, in that past life so I can experience everything and give them an idea. And once I usually start talking about, I see this past life, they're giving me this, and this was the reason for it, they're kind of stunned.
Right.
Because it does have to do with a fear or phobia that they have. And I wouldn't know that.
Right.
Right? Or it might have to do with a characteristic that's why I do that. Or that's why I don't have a good relationship with my mother. Or whatever it might be.
Right.
And, that's why I got a divorce from my first husband. This type of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, So that's how I would kind of start with it, is using their spirit guides to place me in that past life. And it just has to be that part of the past life that either caused karma, released karma, or had to do with their purpose in the lifetime.
Oh, yeah, because you wouldn't kind of need the other ones because those ones were kind of completed.
Exactly. And what's really, really important is how the person dies.
Oh.
In their past life, because that can create karma as well, or what I like to call soul shock, which causes what people like to call hauntings or ghosts.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's another whole subject someday.
Yeah.
On this. But it basically is if we die bitter, angry, that gets carried on into the next lifetime as something that we have to release. Right. Okay, so it's kind of like a karma thing. If we get murdered, that causes trauma or shock.
I can imagine.
Suicide is more trauma shock than it is, like being bitter or angry. Okay. Because most people that commit suicide have some form of mental illness. And so they're hearing things in their head. Okay. To cause them to do it.
Right.
If it's intentional, that's really bad. If it's intentional and they don't have anything that would cause them to do that, that's really bad because they can get stuck.
Right.
Yeah. Stuck.
And when a spirit gets stuck like that, what kind of, is it just the next kind of life and whether or not they can clear that trauma? Like, how do you get unstuck?
Yeah. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Think about this. Whenever we pass away, we lose our physical body and all sense of time because time is man-made. Though I have a scientist friend who says, no way, that's for real. I go, yeah, okay, right. Reason-minded here again. Okay. So the world created time. We didn't have time to start out with. Okay. Right. Created time. So basically you lose time, your physical body, but you keep your reason, your five senses, and your emotions for a little while, okay, as you're adjusting. Now, if you don't have any really bad stuff, that's going to dissipate pretty fast, and you're going to be on your merry little way on the other side, okay? But if it does, linger, and you die angry, and you're angry that you died, or you had, been murdered, or, suicide, you realize nothing has stopped, especially with suicide. Nothing has stopped. You still have your emotions. You still have your reason. It's scary. And they get stuck in that. The only way to get out of it is pretty much themselves. Just like we can get out of our heads, they got to get out of their head.
Right.
That's the way to do it. Now, they can have help, like a person like me,
right,
can go in and help them. I'm not going to stand there and say, you're dead, get over it, move on, like some past mediums have done, okay? Instead, I'm going to hold a conversation with them because they were human. They had their reasons for doing what they did.
Right.
And they just need to talk to somebody to listen, because everybody else around can't see them, can't feel them, can't hear them.
Yeah. And that must be incredibly frustrating, especially because can a spirit not realize that they're dead? Like,
yeah, absolutely. If they're sitting watching TV and have a massive heart attack, they're still watching TV. It's like an endless loop. The time stops. So they're still watching the same thing over and over again. They just don't realize it's moved on.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, these strange people come into their house and start clearing things out. It's like, what are you doing? Right. That's the type of thing that they don't realize that they passed away. Or they died Jewish from a heart attack and they were in the middle of doing something and they're still in their, in the house doing that. And these people come in with Catholic holy water and are sprinkling around to get rid of them. It's like, what are you doing? The person was Jewish.
Right.
So, you really need to get to kind of know the spirit that's stuck. what their religion was, if they weren't religious, what happened, why are they upset, why are they still here?
That makes me go back to now thinking about when I was little and the spirit that lived in my house. And did he know, like, was I one of the only people that kind of even acknowledged he was there? Like, did he know? Because when his wife died, he left.
Yeah.
And my mother, I came home from college, I think, one time, and I was like, whoa, what happened? Henry's not here.
Right?
And my mother was like, stop with that. And then she was like 2 weeks later, she said to me, oh, you know, the woman that we bought the house from just passed away. I just saw. And I was like, that's why he's not here. Like, he must have just been waiting for her.
Exactly.
Or she came and got him and was like, hey, because, you know, he
You can
died
let go now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's such a beautiful way to think about it.
Absolutely.
Like, to think that there's people that are stuck and like that your soul family kind of comes back and says like, all right, now we're moving on to this next level.
Exactly. And some of them are so stuck that they try to find another physical human being to hang out with, to pal around with. And that's called, currently it's called entity attachments.
Okay.
They just have a bad attitude, you know? I mean, or they're sad or whatever. And so basically they'll hang out with somebody. So, and then when they hang out with somebody, then that person can take on their characteristics as well. But a way to release that spirit is through age regression or hypnotherapy, or I'm hoping EMDR can do the same thing to release it. And it's the physical person who is telling that person it's okay to go.
Right.
I can't do it. That my client has to do it.
Okay. The person they're attached to. Right. Because why would a spirit listen to you if they have nothing kind of to do with you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Although, do you ever come across like a spirit that has been stuck or didn't know, and like then they can talk to you and they just are like, oh, wait, I'm just dead now. I can just go?
Absolutely. Yeah.
They're like, oh, I just didn't know.
Yeah. There was a case in the town where it's in Contra Costa County, where there was a woman who owned the house, bought this house, and she started drinking. Was not a drinker, just started drinking and having parties, and it was like, what the heck? You know, why am I doing this? And so she left, sobered up, but her daughter rented it from her mother along with a roommate. And they started drinking, having it. So they called me in to figure out what happens. Now, this is something that's kind of typical, okay? And I think it'll explain everything we're talking about. So I went over there, and I ran across the spirit that was stuck. And she was stuck because she was afraid that the guy next door, that lived next door, was going to murder, okay, the two girls in the house. Wow. Same thing with the mother before. She was an alcoholic, okay. She would hide in the bathroom, come and hide in the bathroom of the girl's house, okay. And I had to figure out, well, what the heck is going on next door? And I asked her, I said, what happened? And she said, my boyfriend came over in the house next door and murdered me. And he murdered me in the bathroom, and I was drunk.
Oh, wow.
And I'm worried about these girls with the guy next door. And I said, so the guy next door is not your boyfriend. Yeah. And she said, no. My boyfriend, I'm sure he's passed away by now, she said. I said, okay, or somewhere else. She says, but I can't leave knowing they're not safe. Well, it ends up being that the guy that lives next door is pretty much secluded. He doesn't come out much. His brother murdered their parents.
Oh my gosh.
And somehow she connected with this neighbor, okay, but would travel over to the other house, where the girls were, and they would start drinking because she was an alcoholic.
Wow.
And you could see how you can pick up these things.
Right.
So the solution is that we had to make sure that she knew that these two girls were safe. And they were getting ready to sell the house to a couple that had a baby. And they thought,
Right.
Okay. So I talked to her about sea salt. And I said, sea salt can absorb negative energy. She said, okay. She trusted me.
Right.
And I said, so I'm going to have them go out and buy a whole bunch of sea salt while I'm still here. She said, don't leave. I said, I'm not leaving. And she said, and they're going to sprinkle it, big sections of it between that house and here. And that will block that from happening to them.
Right.
And she said, okay, let's try it. So she went out there with the girls, put on the sea salt. I was watching her. She came back in. And I said, can you feel the difference in energy now?
Mm-hmm.
She said, absolutely. Thank you so much. And with that, she left and walked down the street.
Wow.
So you got to talk to them as if they're a human being.
Right.
And figure out first, what the heck is going on here? House has been fine ever since.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I love these stories. I could listen to them all day. Because it just gives you a sense of peace, or at least for me it does.
Yeah.
I know for some people it might seem even more scary, but it to me feels less scary.
Yeah.
It makes every kind of life less scary. It makes me feel less alone.
Right. Like, I mean, isn't that the thing? We fear people we don't understand.
Right.
And so if you fear the spirit and you don't know their story, you're going to continue to fear that spirit.
Right.
Because you're not going to understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Or why it's making you do what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You told me that I have a spirit guide named Bert, and now every time like I'm out for a walk, or if I go like the other night I walked around here and it's very industrial, and I was just like, sorry, Bert, I'll get you to the woods again soon. Like,
right?
And it's just a nice knowing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it gives me more of an appreciation of like, okay, so he's like, you said he's a big lumberjack and an outdoors guy. And I'm like, I've been kind of wanting to learn how to garden more and learn kind of more about just
exactly. And he's going to help and being in nature.
And it's like, maybe that's one of the reasons why I've been having that kind of calling or being drawn to doing more plants and things like that.
Exactly.
I'm kind of open to him now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's amazing.
It helps a lot.
How do you, one of the other questions is like, I believe in like signs, and I think the universe kind of puts it out there, and and it's becoming more acceptable. And like this morning I saw a butterfly and I thought, this is not a time when I should see a butterfly.
Exactly.
But I was thinking about this and I was excited about this conversation and kind of exploring more of this with you. And then all of a sudden there was a butterfly in the middle of traffic.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's the universe being like, yes, this is the right path.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's a certain person that passed away at different times, like different butterfly. It's just a knowing that was like, oh, that was my grandmother, or that's my aunt, or and it, like, did I put that on there, or was it like, how do you connect a sign with a spirit?
Well, let's go back to what John did this morning to me.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Because that's a sign.
Right.
The song, Knocking on Heaven's Door.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you not, right? Okay. Very good. Okay. So they can give us signs a lot. They're not going to need to become a butterfly to give us a sign.
Right.
But they can bring a butterfly over to let you know that they're there. My dad, when I get really into my head and I'm really worried and upset and way too linear minded, I'll smell like something's burning in the house. And so I'll check the plugs. I'll do all these different things. Then I'll realize, oh, it's my dad. Because it was very calming for me when he would come home after a fire to smell that on him. While I was in the bedroom, I could smell it and just say, he's home. Okay. So he uses that as a sign for me.
Right.
Let's see. They know that the five senses are an illusion, so they can manipulate any type of energy. Anything that appears solid to us can be moved, all different kinds of signs. So how do you know if it's coincidence or not? I'd say first think of it as a message. Okay.
Okay.
Have that belief, that faith in your intuition. Okay. And your divine love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That basically in your psychic abilities, that's a sign. Okay. And then you might want to go back into the linear and see if there's any chance that it's something different. Okay.
Okay.
But when you see a butterfly and it's not the right season, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, when you smell Italian food from your great grandmother that was Italian, okay, and there's no Italian food, that's a sign. So you can pretty much figure that out. Our problem is we don't pay attention to the signs.
Yes.
We don't pay attention to them. So it's being more aware of and having a belief in spirituality.
Yeah.
You can still remain religious and just say, you know, I love these rituals. I'm still going to do them, but I don't like, you know, being told what to do.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to skip that part. Okay. So for Catholics, I guess it would be skipping confession. Maybe. Okay. All right. But you love the whole service.
Right.
Okay. The whole energy of the church and all of that. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling. So you have to, because of this overgrowth of reason, it shuts down our intuition. It shuts down, you know, our soul and spirit. Okay. A lot. And we don't realize that they're messages. So it's just having to be open to it.
Yeah. Have you read or heard? Do you know who Chelsea Handler is?
Yeah, isn't she a TV?
Yeah, she's a comedian, and she wrote a book about basically signs and how her brother died when she was really young, and she had this kind of
absolutely
shut off kind of emotion, and she went to therapy and she went to psychotherapy, and they went and did a bunch of things, and she's very cynical and very kind of New Jersey, kind of brassy, bossy bitch.
Yeah,
and
yeah, she is.
She wrote a book about how like she kind of got cracked open during psychotherapy about she realized like a bunch of her trauma was from her brother dying suddenly.
Right.
He went off to a hike and never came back, and she felt abandoned by him. And she talked about how in her psychotherapy, her psychiatrist, I think his name's Dr. Dan or something, told her like, find an object, and every time you want a message from your brother, that will be it. So she picked oranges.
Right.
And she was like, all of a sudden, every time I would think about him, there would be an orange.
Right.
And she's like, in places that it shouldn't be. Or like I'd walk into a place and it would have a huge picture of oranges.
Exactly.
And it's just made me think of it.
Exactly.
Like you just have to be open to it, and it's getting to listen to that little voice.
That reminds me of the story of John worked with a client of mine that was a professional baseball player. And I let him, the baseball player, you know, borrow John a lot for his skills, to help him with his skills. And John loved, you know, Grateful Dead, Frank Zappa. He was into, you know, Janis Joplin, Aretha Franklin. He was a hippie. And the baseball player loved classical music. But when John wanted his attention, he'd make sure that if well, in this particular case, the player turned on the radio looking for the classical music, and it was a Grateful Dead song. And he said, oh, I guess John wants me to go to this place I wasn't planning on going. And it ended up being a bar that his friend owned in Nanuet, New York. And John is buried right across the street in St. Anthony's Church.
Oh, wow.
From this bar. John just wanted this baseball player to know, okay, where he used to hang out. I mean, what's the coincidence there?
Right.
Yeah. That's no coincidence.
That is not. And yeah, the chances that John's across the street from his friend's bar and go there and just after they
need to go,
you kind of introduce them.
Yeah, sort of. His friend kept asking him, please come after the game. And he kept saying no. But then when he heard the Grateful Dead song, he said, John wants me to go.
Yeah.
Called back the friend and said, send the limousine. I'm coming.
I know.
Yeah.
Someday maybe you'll tell us the story of that baseball player. I mean, I might know it.
I know you do. Yeah, it's sometimes good not to mention clients' names.
Yeah, no, of course. And I was asking you about that.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of is your, like, do you have a client, like a policy on what you share and what you don't? Because what you do is
Absolutely.
very intimate.
It is.
And
it's confidential.
Yeah.
And if a person gets a reading, then they can tell anybody else about it.
Right.
But if that friend or family member calls me, I won't say a word.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And
Yeah.
you must be kind of used to that because you must, because of your psychic stuff, do you know what's going to happen to people? Like, do you have to be careful of what you give people? Like, we talked about kind of.
Absolutely, you should. Yeah. We've talked about, so that just walk up to people, I mean, mediums and psychics.
Right.
Just walk up to people and start saying, oh, you have blah, blah. That can be very traumatic. You don't know where that person's at with it.
Right.
With the grief or anything of that sort. Or if that was, a sexual abuse case or whatever. You just shouldn't do that.
Right.
So, I mean, let's talk about the baseball player again. The first time I met him was through another client. They were friends. And he called me. And he was recovering from an injury. Mm-hmm. And he asked me if I would, it was a Sunday night. And he said, can you do a reading for me right now? And I said, no. I said, you need to make an appointment.
Right.
And it's Sunday night. And he said, but I'm going out to I'm rejoining my team.
Right. Traveling.
Tomorrow, and I'll be traveling. I said, well, first of all, why can't you call me after the game or before the game?
Right.
Let's make an appointment. And he said, well, I don't really want to do it. I want to do it today. And I said, well, you know what? We're going to be able to do it this week anyway, because you're not ready yet to play. You're going to re-injure yourself. And he went, no, I'm going to be fine. I said, okay, that's okay. So for my business, there was a TV, and I turned on the game. Mm-hmm. And here he was, he hit the ball, and he was limping from first to second. And I went, there you go.
Yeah.
And he called me the next day.
Yeah. To make an appointment.
I said, I guess you have the time now, huh?
Yeah.
He said, yes. So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I would talk to you forever, but I know that I have to let you go. But I want to tell everyone to keep an eye out because you have a podcast coming out.
Yes.
Psych and Soul.
Yes. We are trying to put it all together. We've got our subjects.
Yeah.
We've had to re-record a few times now. We're looking for an editor. If anybody's out there wants to edit for us. And it's visual as well.
Yes.
So, it's called Psych and Soul, and it's with Sarah Hamilton. She's a psychotherapist and family therapist, and me, professional psychic medium and empath.
Yeah.
For spiritual wellness.
So,
Yeah.
Are you discussing kind of different topics? Are you interviewing someone? What's the style of the podcast?
In the beginning, it's just going to be the two of us.
Yep.
And we're trying to merge science, spirituality, and psychotherapy together. And so our topics will be, first of all, we're going to be discussing what we do. Mm-hmm. But the topics are going to be on, spirit guides, how psychotherapy fits in with that, how science fits in, much like what we talked about today.
Nice.
And then I think eventually we will have guests.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll come on and be analyzed by both of you.
Okay.
I am so in love with all of this, and getting to know you and meet you and kind of spend time with you has been such a pleasure. I am so thankful.
So how do people get a hold of you if they want more information about your guests?
Oh, I have a website, duckandreality.com.
Okay.
And I'll do a whole bio on you.
You need to let them know.
Yeah. Yes. So, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And then, because you have, is it 4 books that you've already written?
No, I have. No, I don't
Oh.
have any books
Oh,
written. I started one to help psychologists and psychiatrists understand gifted children.
Right.
Long time ago, but I think the podcast is going to take its place.
Okay. But
and it's Sarah that's writing a book.
What
Yeah.
about the 7
The 7 stages?
Yes.
That isn't a book.
Oh, okay.
That is actually a chart.
Oh, all right.
Kind of like a chart.
Yeah.
So that I do have on our website.
Yeah, and
that
that's-
you can get.
Yeah.
On our website. But that's a chart.
Oh, okay.
But I am an audio author of guided imageries.
Okay.
Yeah. Spirit, how to communicate with spirit friends. Astral traveling is another one.
Ooh.
A guided meditation to communicate with your spirit guides, which is on the inside looking in instead of in, and then chakra shower
Oh, okay.
to help align your chakras
Ooh, nice.
in a shower while you're taking a shower.
That sounds perfect.
Yes.
And then, so everyone, anyone that wants a reading from you can go to your Natural Healings website
Yes.
and can find all the information for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I will definitely probably have you back if you'll come.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to come
Yeah.
back. And for any budding baseball players out there, you want to check out my Tao of Baseball, because that's what I taught professional baseball players on how to enhance their abilities.
Yeah. Because you've worked
yeah.
with baseball players, celebrities. I mean,
Yes.
you have, what, 8?
I've done the gamut, rock
Yeah.
bands. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done a lot.
And,
And John's been with me the whole time.
John seems like he's had a very,
Yes, he loves all of
exciting
that.
afterlife.
Yes, yes.
Oh, all right, Judy. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you all for listening. And make sure you go find some joy today and maybe a spirit.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.